The topic of our panel is Solutions for Agro-Industry Partnerships for Strategic Investments in Brazil and Africa. And I can tell that something that is always important as I took part in Brazil Africa Forum for some years, and something that is really important in this event is that the relationship between Brazil and Africa is always growing, but it always can go beyond. There's always room for something more in all sectors, either investments, partnerships, technology, science, so there's always room for something more. The ambassador mentioned some figures related to the commerce between China and Africa and Brazil. So there's a lot of room to be explored. And I'd like to start this panel hearing a Brazilian person who lives in Brazil for over 37 years. Isn't it, Marcos? This is an interesting perspective for us because he has a experience of over 3 decades of so many changes. If you were to analyze what you see, not only in general relationship between Africa and Brazil, but the changes in investments, considering all your experience as a business person living in Africa, would you say that first, what does really stand out in this area and what are the main needs in this moment?
Okay, thank you very much, Carol. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As you said, I've lived in Africa for 37 years, part in Kenya and working in agribusiness, especially supplying machinery for the agricultural sector, from harvesting to soil preparation, and factories for adding value to the products. So Africa has undergone many changes. Many of these changes have been very positive changes. And speaking of agriculture, more specifically, African governments are interested in substituting exports using Kenya as an example, but Africa in general. 30% of what they consume, what they eat, is imported. So they would like to substitute imports in terms of the food they are consuming. To do that, there is much land that needs to be planted, and you have agricultural production. Also developing animals for food consumption in Africa. So there are many challenges. People say, oh, there, all these hectares to be planted and harvested. But Africa has a similar story and situation as in Brazil and other countries. Many people invest in Africa and then regret it because they have not considered the cultural elements and other elements that are common in those countries. Many people invested and ended up losing money. So investors are very cautious before investing in Africa. But there are many great opportunities. There is a young generation that's very interested in commercial agriculture. 70% of what is produced in Africa is produced by small farmers. And these small farmers, they, plant in the morning and they eat what they have planted at night. So it's very poor and, very weak still. So, for example, what is most of the food production is in sub-Saharan Africa. So the opportunities are huge, but the challenges are huge as well. So, when you say, oh, we have all these thousands of hectares to be planted, that doesn't really reflect reality because, as I said, there are many challenges to be faced. And we have conflicts. What are these conflicts? This was mentioned yesterday. So we have the animal wildlife. We still have a lot of pastoralists, so they don't respect the, limitations like property limits. Um, Community leaders that aren't really the best leaders. So, all of these elements need to be taken under consideration. We work or we created a company called Campo here in Brazil to develop the Cerrado area, and they are the main way we develop agriculture and livestock in on the African continent. And to our surprise, just recently, a group of investors from Brazil is investing thousands of, actually millions of dollars to produce food in Africa. So Brazilians are finally leaving Brazil and taking their investments to the African continent. I serve as their technical advisor, and we have a project that has already started, and we should have 2 or 3 more projects with them. And we always try to have a core that's independent, that is financially sustainable. So we don't depend on small farmers. That's different than many projects who want to work with the small farmers and to lift up these small farmers, but without taking into consideration all these other elements. We want these farmers to work in our projects, but without depending on them for the survival of the project. So we do want to help these small farmers who are struggling to survive. Um, I can't talk about all of Africa, but let's talk about Kenya. The average age of these farmers is 60, okay? And the young people, because of the internet and smartphones, things like that, they are leaving the rural areas and going to the urban centers. So, these small farmers are a dying species unless we create the conditions for these young people to stay in the fields, in the rural areas. And I was at a forum in South Africa, and I was talking to an American woman, and she said, "Oh, we need to make agricultural in Africa sexy again." So I agree. So what's sexier, to drive a tractor or to work with a shovel? So young people don't want to suffer and go through the same struggles that their parents and grandparents went through. So there is a huge transformation happening in the African continent. Thank you very much, Marcos, for your perspective.
And I think it's very interesting for us to jump now in an African perspective, Stephen. So what is necessary at this moment to unlock this potential of Africa to boost this agriculture value chain? Because we have here some very interesting insights that Marcos has brought to us. So from your perspective right now, being a young man in Africa at this point, do you agree with him?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I agree
Com certeza. Sorry. I totally agree with what.
comes with a lot of opportunities and challenges. So I think basically when you match the opportunities and challenges, you strike a balance. That's where you can easily say that either Africa is benefiting or losing. But I think in such a discussion, you have to bring in some perspective because this sector, the agriculture sector, I mean, is the foundation of any economy. So as the saying goes, a hungry man is an angry man. If you are unable to feed your people and they are hungry, this will, it just presupposes that they cannot do, they'll have the energy to do other things. And the sector, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities. The land, the arable land is there, the population dividend, which you have like a lot of young people who can work, but they get pushed away because, there are a lot of, let's say, disincentives within the agriculture sector. I will take cocoa, for example, in Ghana. I mean, averagely, there are over 60 people that are involved in cocoa production. because basically the young people are running away, right, into other productive economic sectors. So you could ask yourself, why is it the case that you have aged people only doing cocoa farming? It's because within an average cocoa farmer, if the farmer gets, let's say, $10,000, almost 70% of it goes into the cost of producing the cocoa. So you will be buying the farm inputs, the fertilizers, and everything, and paying for human resources to help cater for the farm. So at the end of it, they lose. So there's no benefit in it. But I think what we are refusing, or possibly what we are neglecting now, is if agriculture is supposed to stand, right? Brazil's transformation of its agriculture sector wasn't just a miracle. It was basically a deliberate step that they took. And this is where we have to look at the agriculture value chain, right? Agriculture has a chain. There is a process to agriculture, right? From the input that you get to production, to processing and packaging, to distribution and transport, and then before it gets to the retail or the market. If all this chain, let's say it's not connected, definitely you will lose out. And this is the case that in most of the African government, in such a forum, or let's say such a gathering, I'm always tempted to, make a strong case that we should have the African leader sitting with us, actually the politician, because at the end of it, while the private sector is making efforts, let's say the road from point A to point B, if it's not constructed, tomatoes cannot move from point A to point B. So this is actually the responsibility of the politician to make sure that there's easy access in terms of transport to move goods from point A to point B. So when this chain is disconnected, that's where you face a lot of challenges. So, and basically, literally, which I would say that you don't reap where you have no sow. So basically, you reap where you sow. So if you're not investing in this sector, you can't definitely get the benefit out of. There are a lot of, inspirations, and then, other countries are doing it, which we can learn. The African continent can learn. Possibly we are learning. Either the learning is too slow or the learning is not hard enough. So I think basically we make sure that the chain is connected. When that chain is connected within the agriculture space, everything will fall in place. You make sure there is input. You make sure, that from the input to the production up to the retail, that is, connected. I think that is where the issue is. If this is not addressed, the food import will continue to increase. As of today, we have over $94 billion in food imports from 2021 to 2023. So if this is not kept, the scenario will continue as we are seeing it. But I think basically it's about connecting the chain, and that chain needs the financing. So we have to have governments, we have to have institutions that are deliberate to make sure that they invest in agriculture sector to connect the various, value chain, the parts of the value chain.
And do you feel that this scenario is more positive at this moment?
It's positive because we have seen countries that are trying to make efforts to reduce their imports, to make sure there are import substitution, industries within their economy to produce what could otherwise be imported, except that it's not being done. That's why, for me, in most of the cases, I came into commodity trading, especially in the agriculture sector, because I saw that there is a bit of a huge gap between demand and supply. So basically, what is needed is not supplied, and what is supplied is not needed. So there is a scenario in Ghana where a mining company wanted to source its local food from the community it's operating. Actually, it wasn't able to get what is needed to feed its workers, right? So what to do is to go and then import some of it, into the market. So yes, the prospects are there. We just have to look at the brighter side, but the challenges are still, existing, which we can basically bridge if you are very deliberate and you are just conscious effort to be done by the various governments.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Acho que há pontos muito interessantes aí quando a gente...
Well, Stephen, when we look at the value chain, as Stephen said, and he talked about the need for the government to participate, but also private investment. So now I would like to turn the word over to you, Daniel Balaban. You're director of the Center of Excellence Against Hunger in Brazil. So I think you can talk to us about public policies for sustainable agriculture and how that fits into this whole value chain, and how that, you know, be carried over into the African continent. But how can this value chain be developed, and how can it be connected so that it flows well? Thank you very much, Caroline. So I agree with what was said. We are living in very decisive times in our planet. Either we will take some actions and follow along that pathway, or we won't have a planet left in the future. The COP30 will be focusing on that. So we need to think about our planet in a much more structural way and focusing on the population's well being. All over the world today, we have 1% of the population detaining 50% of the wealth on the planet. This is not sustainable going forward, and this is just increasing. The riches, the wealth of the world is in the hands of just a few people. So we need to think about the structures and how this income concentration can be spread out more evenly. I think this is essential so that we are able to cooperate, especially thinking here about Brazil and the African continent. The Center of Excellence that I run, we already work with over 30 African countries in structuring public policies and to help these small farmers, these family farms, are able to produce food, and that these foods that they produce have demand and a competitive price, have this whole production and distribution organized. So many times we ask farmers in Africa, why don't you plant something? They say, oh, I don't have enough money to plant it on my own. There's no subsidy to help me plant. And sometimes, the government comes and takes it from my farm, and they don't pay anything because there is a demand. So we need to have these well-established public policies so that this whole food production is directed to programs, for example, for the food and meals in the schools. I was going to ask, what would be one of the best practices? Well, these food in the schools programs. We have evidence that every dollar that is invested in the food meal program brings back $9 and $14 to the community, and it keeps children in school. They are going to be well fed. But there is this direct connection of the production of these small farmers with this public policy. So they know that they're going to produce these foods, and those foods will be used to feed the children in the schools. In Africa alone, I think in the last 15 years, there's been a revolution in terms of meals in the schools. Most African countries have some type of national food program for school students. So our goal is that all of them are able to produce food and feed their population. So through these public policies that are structured, then we will be able to make this economic structure more dynamic and see the fruits of this production in the future. With the governments that we have worked in Africa, we have seen great interest. They have people who have very good education. They're very well equipped and prepared to develop these programs. You can't develop something without planning, with public policies in place. So it's very important to promote these public policies so that the countries are able to adapt their local conditions and develop further. Yeah, I believe that Brazil has expertise in many different sectors that they can share. For example, technological transfer. And on that topic, Marcelo, I would like to hear from you. When we talk about the best practices in the Brazilian agricultural sector, we might also take that into the innovation, new ideas that are coming about, and research, and maybe industrial development also. You work at CNI, the National Confederation of Industries. So I think this is also an important step to be able to replicate projects, have greater integration between Brazil and African countries. So what would you point out to us about investment in research and development at the moment in Brazil? Well, yes, for sure. The history of Brazilian agricultural development, as our ambassador mentioned, is a story that has many successful cases. There has been strong investment in research, especially through Embrapa. Now, Embrapa is totally geared towards agriculture, but the Brazilian industry has also contributed, even outside of the government sector. But Brazilian industries privately invest in innovation and development. At CNI, and in all of the federations, industrial federations, in the different states of the country, we have an organization that is associated to these industrial federations. So we have a training institution called Senai, and it's been known for 80 years for developing workers for the industries. But in the last 15 years, we have worked on research and development and technological innovation within Senai. So I think over the last 10 years, we have created 26 or 27 Senai innovation centers and innovation and technology centers. These institutes have carried out different types of research in very advanced sectors like using laser and artificial intelligence and other advanced materials, metal alloys, this type of thing, and also consolidated technologies such as mineral exploration and so on.
Topics we've been working with is researches to the production and creation of new fertilizers. This is an interesting topic for the Brazilian agriculture, but not only for the Brazilian agriculture, but for the agriculture all over the world. Another topic that we've been working with is precision agriculture. This uses drones, AI, its goal is to use the inputs such as water, crop protection products, fertilizers, at the very individual plant. That's why it considers all the variables within the same area, and considering also the season of the year, soil conditions, so it applies the exact amount of fertilizer or crop protection or water, and with this it contributes to minimize the environmental impact and to have a better use of resources and increase or expand the production of food at a lower cost for the society. So we have this research being done in some of our innovation studies. So when it comes to partnerships, Senai is open to have partnerships with African researchers. Throughout the last 25 years, we have done many cooperation projects with the African continent, but they have been mainly for training trainers and educating instructors to industrial professions in Africa, from the textile sector to mechanic, automotive, and so on and so forth. We haven't yet had strong partner researches partnerships with African resources, but you know the doors are open, maybe until the end of this forum. But you made something interesting, and then I'll pass the floor to Leila. Considering the agrochemical industry, Marcelo mentioned the domain of Asia and China in supplying agrochemicals to the world. And when it comes to food security, we have to bear in mind that not only we have to ensure the quality of what we are producing, so we need safe food that we can eat without the risk of all the chemicals that comes with it, but we have to talk about value. The production cost in Brazil is now reducing their production costs when they open this market to agrochemicals. Tell me, how is your experience in practical terms, and how important can this be to fostering a sustainable production in a chain that promotes food security, especially when you look at the needs of some of the African countries? Good morning. This topic is very connected to agriculture in Brazil. When it comes to agribusiness, we have to bear in mind on how to improve our product in Brazil, reducing costs to make food cheaper. At Dizan Group, we have an experience of over 40 years. We have seen many challenges that we are facing and other countries are facing that, and we are addressing those topics in Brazil, trying to understand how we can improve it. We would not be able to talk about this topic without talking about a very important step that Brazil has taken when Brazil opens this market to generic products after the patent. So previously, a farmer had their challenges in the field, but there was only one single product to help that farmer. There was a patent of a agrochemical, and they didn't have many options to replace that product. So those products, as because of the monopoly, it was very expensive, and farmer had a very high production cost to manage their crops. While when Brazil opens to the after patent or generic products market a few decades ago, this market grows so much, and several companies start to invest in this business in Brazil, investing in research, development, replicating existing products, making post-patent products in a similar way, and offering to the rural to the farmer are the other solutions for us to reduce the production cost. And this means to bring more agrochemicals to farmers. It doesn't mean to have more agrochemicals in the field because this is very expensive. So farmers doesn't like using it. So as much they can avoid using it, the better. But when you bring this big range of products, giving them several options, you bring competition to the business. You bring more options so they can reduce the productivity cost. So a product that usually costs 1,000 reals because of the patent now is costing 500 or way less. So less than half of the production cost for the farmer. So what does it mean? It means cheaper food on people's tables. So this is an important step that Brazil has done to become competitive. I was here listening to the panelists talking about bottlenecks, logistics costs in Brazil, Brazilian cost that is quite high. But when we compare it with others, we when we export grains and products from Brazil, we are strong in agribusiness. As the first world countries can do it, and we can do this opening the market so that we can reduce the production costs. And when it comes to security, I think Brazil has done it in an excellent way. Most of the big countries where agrochemicals are approved, countries such as Paraguay or Argentina, where we are, also Bolivia and China, most of those countries, agrochemicals are approved only by the Ministry of Agriculture, who checks the feasibility of this product to the agriculture. But Brazil, even having the need of being approved by IBAMA, so they will assess the risk of this product to the environment and as well to be approved by Anvisa, which is the Brazilian FDA. So they measure the risks of those chemicals for human health. So 3 organs: Agricultural Ministry, IBAMA, and Anvisa. So they will provide a good product to the environment and to the population. And Brazil does this with excellence, so they can bring a safe food to be eaten. So when we export products from Brazil, we know that those products are safe. I mean, edible products. So we have many products here, and we could reduce the cost of productivity with safety. And we remember the similarities between Brazil and African countries, isn't it, Marcos? In several aspects, but when it comes to agriculture, remember the geographic similarities and soil similarities. There are some Brazilian practices that were already adapted. And even today, when we look at the past decades in Brazil, in terms of production of fertilizers and other chemicals that are produced, we can implement it the way we do it in Brazil, which makes it very easy to implement. Yes, this is very important. Sub-Saharan Africa is very similar to Brazil. Sometimes I bring African business people or business people that comes from Brazil to the West Africa, and they find it excellent because the soil is very similar, the climate is similar, and other factors. So Brazil is always a reference around the world, being the best tropical agriculture in the world. So we just have to bring this to there without many modifications. Now we are exploring biotechnology. So we have partners in Brazil and other places in the world to replace chemicals and other kinds of fertilizers, or reducing this with biotechnology. So Brazil is really, people are impressed when we take people to see the farms, especially in this Brazilian Cerrado that is very similar to the African savanna. And when you talk about the history of our Cerrado, people get really impressed. And I think Brazil has a lot to contribute with Africa. Brazil has reached in 40 or 50 years with this copy and paste. We can do this in only 10 years in Africa. So the new generations that are coming to the market gives us a big chance of success. So we can see that Africa is trying to find solutions to make this growth to happen. Oh yes, absolutely. And we also talk about our, and we are very good at marketing as well. So when I bring submissions from Africa to here, and we take them to the Cerrado or to Sao Paulo or to other places around the country, and they are really impressed with our performance in agriculture and livestock.
talk about boosting this connection between Brazil and Africa in the agriculture sector, we have also to remember that Africa pollutes less than anyone in the world, but is heavily dealing with the effects of climate change. And I think this is a very important issue for us to have into consideration when we talk about boosting this sector, promoting new practices in agriculture, talking about chemicals, talking about food security. We have to take into consideration that you are facing the most difficult times right now when we talk about climate change, climate alterations. And how do you think this is something for us to have into consideration, for us to talk to the road, also to Brazil, of course, in order to ensure that the new investments that are going to be available, that are going to be held, and that are going to come to boost African sector is going to be an investment focused on avoiding and trying to minimize all this difficulty that has been created when you talked about climate change.
Yeah, for the continent. Already, there are a little bit of issues which we've all identified. You know, in my work experience, so basically what we do is that, you know, at Commodity Monitor, we list the various activities within the agricultural value chain, and then we identify these problems and try to solve. So if it's inputs, I mean, what sort of agrochemical could help all the farmers, whether it's the corn farmer, or the soybean, or the millet farmer. And when we identify this, what we do is, okay, is this being produced in Ghana or West Africa, or can we get this from Brazil? I mean, for me, the clock is ticking. Brazil offers the best inspiration for tropical agriculture, actually for the African continent. It's easy to learn. I mean, we are very close, so it's easy to learn from Brazil. And on top of the challenges, I think basically the agriculture sector is highly smallholder, right? Predominantly smallholder farming. So we have like bits and pieces of people working on small size farms. And this already is a challenge because when it comes to the whole side of business, if you're operating on that small scale, it's easy to be cut off in terms of profit making. So we have been advocating that there has to be a scaling up of production, which means, there has to be some machineries, a farmer using, a combined harvester, is slightly different from a farmer using a cutlass in terms of harvesting. The difference is quite wide. So we have to, make sure that there's a penetration of technology. And on top of this is where climate change even comes in. Because today, a lot of these farmers still depend on rain. Right. So, and the rain, I'll say there's a bit of climate change happening. So the changing patterns of rain, for example, in Ghana, is affecting the farmers a lot. So either a farmer will depend on the rain, and it doesn't rain that entire period, so almost all the crops get, weathered off. So I think where we need to, because the continent pollutes less, but actually when it comes to the impact of climate change, they actually, I would say, face the heavy hit. So to make sure this happens, you just have to invest in technology. Make sure that there is, if there is changing weather conditions, make sure there is an irrigation system being established for some selected miners, farmers at different places. I think this is where the challenge comes in. At the end of it, it boils down to investment. And then when there is money and there is no plan, as our colleague said, there is no policy direction, you can get the money will be wasted. So where there is a policy direction, there has to be the finance. And where there is a finance, you have to have a lesson or someone to fall to, and Brazil offers that easy option to learn how we can improve. But I think climate change is quite real. It's affecting, times of cultivation or production, and also for harvesting, and that has to be sorted. But at the end of it, it's about making sure there is equity when it comes to the whole climate financing. Brazil is hosting COP30. This is where we have to highlight that, if there is anything happening, we have to make sure that we unleash enough climate finance to help the farmers so that they can actually face the challenges that climate change presents.
Daniel, como é que você
Daniel, how do you think we can do an adaptation of the Brazilian technology and Brazilian experience and agricultural policy in Brazil? How can we adapt it somehow so that we can boost this production in Africa in terms of what the Excellence Center Against Hunger to result it in food security? How can this work be done? I think it's important that we understand that Brazil today is leading the agricultural production. I know many countries, and Brazil today is leading this way how to produce, especially the Brazilian uh, law on that. Many times we criticize things and we don't see what's going right. Brazil has a research structure that is very good. Embrapa is highly recognized by its excellence. Brazil is doing so much, including thinking about ecological production. Ec- Next week we'll have COP 30, and we will discuss the agroecological production in several regions in Brazil. Brazil today is one of the countries with more degraded lands. We have around 100 million acres of degraded lands. Those lands are not suitable neither for agriculture nor for livestock. And of course, there are solutions available, but those solutions rely on work, investment to try to recover those lands. Just to give you an idea, Brazilian agriculture uses 70 million, and we have 100 million of acres that are just inappropriate. So we have to look for solutions that integrate and recover those lands so we can produce. And the Brazilian experience will also have reflections because Africa has also degraded lands because of the history of exploitation. The African continent has a big amount of degraded land. So what we're doing in Brazil, and there are several initiatives going on, you can research on that, initiatives that are so beautiful to try to recover and do agroecology that is sustainable, able to produce quality food, and this is also being taken to several African countries so we can exchange experiences and try to help them to recover their lands, producing increasingly more food. As it was said, Africa is not yet self-sufficient in food production, but they can become, because that's the only place in the world where we still have lands that can be used. What we have to do is to encourage the use of those lands by local farmers or by investors to make them produce more food so that can be sustainable through public policies.
Like I said, without public policies to encourage agriculture, it can't be done. It's expensive to do that. So we also need to get the countries to encourage the sustainable agricultural food production through public policy. Then we will have enough food for the whole continent. I think another sector that we could look at here in Brazil when we talk about production would be the biologicals and the organic farming, that segment. So, what happened in the last few years, as Leila already mentioned, the advance in the agrochemical industry. Can we consider that the practice of organic biological agriculture is a model when there is a reduction in costs for this type of production, and maybe give some countries some autonomy in terms of this type of production, especially talking about the fertilizers? Well, there are two sides. Well, now thinking about, we're an agrochemical industry, so we create biological products as well. So obviously, we see that there's greater autonomy when you're talking about these products. So theoretically, these products are developed and produced in Brazil. So most of these like fertilizers that are used are imported from China and some from India. Um, the materials that we need that are imported from there. Now, what we experienced during the pandemic was, okay, how could we do that? There was a lockdown in China, all ports were closed, so imports and exports, weren't uh, available. So what did we do? 90% of the agrochemical elements that we used weren't available. So we had to really decide, what we could do to find a solution. The ports were closed, the factories were being closed. So it was total chaos for a while. Then we faced many challenges. The prices went sky high. We weren't able to import those raw materials. Many producers were, or many farmers were affected because they didn't have fertilizers and the other products that they needed for their farms to plant. So that's where the biological products come into play, because besides being a sustainable product and that are environmentally friendly, they can be developed and produced in Brazil. So that's what we need to encourage, and also try to get the approval for these biological products. We just had some new laws come that were approved to use these types of products. So we need to encourage that and develop that, because that will make our country more independent. Sometimes we'll face challenges that are beyond our control, as happened in the pandemic. So we need to find solutions internally, locally. So why not substitute agrochemicals for biological products? Now, obviously, we don't have 100% of the solutions needed for these agrochemical, products. We haven't been able to substitute 100% of them. So thinking specifically about biological agriculture in Brazil, what's the scenario? We would say that 30% of the agrochemical products can be substituted by biological products in Brazil. They can work together side by side. But why not invest to go further in this area, to have the substitution of these chemical products for the biological products? So if we can care for our environment and also, guarantee food security, then I think countries should continue to increase the investments in biological products. So we are highly dependent on Asia for these biochemicals, as I said. And if something like the pandemic happens again, we will be in a difficult spot. So that's why we have been trying to invest more in the biologicals. Okay. Now, we are getting towards the end of our panel, so I would like to ask our production team to get the microphones ready in case there are any questions from our audience for any of our panelists. So please raise your hand if you have a question that you would like to ask one of the members of the panel here. Now, Marcelo, thinking about agricultural production, we can't forget that we have people behind all of these different processes. It's, people who are running the everyday operations in farms. And I thought it was interesting what somebody mentioned, I think Marcos, about, making agriculture sexy again. So, it's much sexier, much more appealing to drive a tractor than to use a shovel and a spade. So how can industry help in offering farming equipment, training the operators of the equipment. So thinking about training specifically for this whole value chain, and considering what you mentioned about the training programs at Sinai. So what do you think is most valuable in this process? And what are some best practices from Brazil that could serve as a boost to the agricultural value chain? Well, that's a very interesting question. Brazil, I think we have over half a century of cooperation and between governments in Africa and Brazil, and our universities in Brazil receive many African students, and many of them come to study agricultural engineering. Now, beyond the academic training, in Brazil, we have this group of institutions. We call them the S system, and Senai, which I mentioned, is part of this system. We have the National Agricultural Association, which is connected to our group, CNI. We also have the Rural Learning System. And so we offer training in agricultural education. And the institution I am connected to, Senai, we have training in agricultural machinery, operation, and we also offer in the local Senai units, for example, Mato Grosso do Sul, Paraná, and other states, we have started offering precision agricultural training. So these courses have been in high demand. Who is looking to take these courses? Well, farm owners who are maybe sending their, workers to learn how to operate these more technological equipments or the agricultural inputs that can be used. But we've noticed that these people have a more technological profile, usually more young people. So it's not just about operating a tractor. So, Marcos, they've gone beyond just driving the tractor. Yeah, now you have the machinery that's operated with a joystick. You have drones, which are much more exciting for the younger generation. And another point that Marcos also brought up, when an investor hears Brazilian investor is interested in investing in an African agricultural production, they are more cautious, as Marco said. They are aware of the risks. So they do a risk analysis, and they have many criteria than all the regulatory aspects, macroeconomic aspects, and they are also going to analyze the availability of trained and qualified workers. This is a very important factor in making the decision of investing or not. So, as I mentioned, we have been training many workers. We have also trained instructors from African institutions who have come to take our courses. And as I mentioned, in agricultural precision areas, machinery also so. Excuse me, but I'm going to make a little ad here that, I think that's fine. You can, make your pitch for your different area of interest. That's fine. So now let me look out here to our audience to see if anyone has any questions. There's one hand raised over here, one here, over here as well. Okay, I'm going to ask our production team to take the microphones to those with a microphone. With their hand up, we'll take the microphone to you. Okay, let's go ahead and start with this question.
Good morning, all. My name is Stephen Williams. I'm from IC Publications. We publish African Business and other magazines. I would actually like to invite a debate between Marcos and Stephen, because I talking with Marcos before, and he was saying that the main problem with African agriculture loss is in the storage facilities that are available to farmers. Yet Stephen mentions another aspect, which is the logistics of moving from the farm gate to the market. And I wonder how the two differ, and whether I could invite both of them to expand on that subject.
Thank you, Stephen, for your question. Well, we don't have enough time for a debate, but I'd like to ask our participants to give a short insight on what Stephen is asking at this moment.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Eu vou ser breve.
Oh, I'll speak briefly, but speaking about small farmers, the small farmers in Africa or in East Africa, they lose out twice when they are planting and when they are harvesting the crop. So they don't have many alternatives. They work with brokers. So when they are harvesting corn, if they don't sell it to the broker, they have to hold on to that crop for 2 or 3 months. But if it doesn't dry well, if they don't have proper storage, they are going to lose possibly all of the crop or part of it. So drying and proper drying and proper storage for these smaller farmers is a huge challenge. The larger ones, they don't have as much of a problem with that. Now, also, sometimes they don't have good seeds, they don't have good inputs, they don't have good machinery, and they end up losing 20 to 30% when they're planting and 20 to 30% when they harvest. So I think the storage aspect is drying and storage is essential. Obviously, there are other factors such as logistics that we have to consider. Unfortunately, small farmers in Africa are exploited many times. So they don't have a little plant tomatoes. Everybody planted tomatoes, and there's an excess of tomatoes, so the price goes down very low. So, it's very difficult. Now, the logistics, thinking who is going to buy this crop, what they have produced. So, another challenge, having the demand for what they have to offer for their supply.
But I think the issue has to be with over 90% of these smallholder farmers. They don't have the capacity to get a warehousing facility or a storage facility. So when they produce, let's say, the tomatoes, they will make sure that within today, they have to get a seller who will cut the tomatoes from the village to the market. And that's where the issue comes in. First is that, either they are underpriced because there are a lot of these farmers producing the tomato at the same time and harvesting at the same time. So there is a connection. It's not about the difference, but there's a connection between the storage and then the transportation. But at the end of it is that they don't have the storage facility. So they are compared to sell before, let's say, the day ends, to sell the tomato to them. And that's where it comes in, that they are either underpriced or you have to wait and make sure that your tomato gets rotten. And to make sure, the best option then is to sell it out at a discounted price or a very bad price that affects them. So I think that the connection is there between the two. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have other question, I think, from this lady in front of. This lady first, okay? This lady here first. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I am from Madagascar. I flew straight away from Madagascar to be here. And I would like to make a point because I'm working for vanilla industry in Madagascar. Madagascar is the biggest global vanilla producer in the world. And the reason why I'm here is because we want to build bridges between, Madagascar and Brazil due to the common, trends between in terms of climate and everything. But also because we believe that Brazil has gone very far in terms of excellence, in terms of innovation, and also in terms of agricultural innovation. And we believe that we are looking for help, in terms of go-to-market experiences and also steps towards building those bridges with Brazil and with South America in general, but Brazil is the biggest door, let's say, and also we see this opportunity of the COP30 because we want to do things in a sustainable way. There's no way of doing business, especially in a spice like vanilla in Madagascar, not respecting the soils, not respecting the communities, not respecting the people. So the point I want to make here is, you know, we believe that there is no begging approach between Africa and Brazil. We have to stand on a win-win platform, and Brazil has to learn from Madagascar, Madagascar has to learn from Brazil. But to do that, we have to open the door. And that's the reason why I'm here, and that's the reason why I want to give Madagascar that visibility of we are part of Africa, geographically extruded from Africa, but we still want to build those bridges with South America, and we truly believe that in vanilla, where we do the biggest production in the world, we want to learn from Brazil, we want to build partnerships with Brazil, and we want to make sure that there are some win-win collaboration between the two countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will take your idea, your desire to build these bridges between Brazil and Africa, to ask our participants, para pedir aos nossos participantes.
So I would like to ask our participants to continue our discussion during or after our moment. Unfortunately, we aren't able to take any more questions, but I think with what this participant brought up, I think this is very relevant and positive and hopeful, which is a good note to end our panel here. So I hope we will carry on with this conversation outside of here. So thank you so much to the participants of this panel, and ask you to just give a brief final message about everything that was discussed, especially looking at the topic, which is partnerships for strategic investment in Brazil and Africa. So just a brief note to end our panel here. Marcelo, let's start with you, please. Well, Brazilian industries want to become more involved with Africa. We have historically maintained relationships and partnership with Africa, but I would say our doors are open for more interactions. Daniel, well, as we said, the only way forward is through partnerships, through exchanges of knowledge. Madagascar is very interesting because actually, coincidentally, next week we have meeting with the government of Madagascar to try and create the full school food meal program there. There's some very interesting initiatives, and the government of Madagascar is interested in cooperating with Brazil to develop these public policies against hunger. So I think we can transfer what we have done and developed in Brazil to other countries. And I think this exchange is very positive so that new public policies can be created, and also for the business environment. The more cooperation there is, the better the business will flow and be able to grow. It's very important to work on these strategic partnerships.
I have seen several transformations in Africa, and this moment of Africa is excellent with great opportunities. There are challenges, but many opportunities as well. And I think that Africa is ready to work with Brazil. There are many similarities between those two. And I'd like to say that the biggest challenge is to the financing. Brazil succeeded because of governmental projects that would finance farmers and so forth that were really suitable for our need. Many people say there's much money for Africa, but nobody can have access to this money. So accessing the money requires so much documents and things that cost so much. And I say this to people, this is the truth. This money that there is there for African agriculture is very hard to have access to. It might be there, but this is the time for Africa. I really believe in the African continent, and I think we're going to do great businesses between Brazil and Africa. So we have Brazil Africa Institute here to help you to unlock this money. Leila, just to agree with what my colleague said and understanding culture of other countries. So we have to make this interchange of information, learning from them, bringing the positive aspects of Brazil. So how could Brazil reach where we are, get to where we are with so many challenges? How can we be one of the biggest grain exporters with all the challenges we have in here? So other countries can do this. Domestic countries are lessons to be learned, and we have to do this exercise on a daily basis to move forward despite the difficulties that we face, and also learn and bring examples from other places. So this interchange is key for us to evolve. So I just agree with other colleagues have said, both the logistics and financial challenges we have to face that will bring us to better understand our reality and trying to understand the best way to overcome this all. Stephen.
All right, so I think my remark is simple. Africa is ready for business. Transformation train is moving. So I will encourage Brazilian companies to come in. Your returns will be huge, in fact, more better. So this is to ensure a win-win situation. And if you need any support, I mean, Commodity Mota, we work as a trading logistics company. Any support within the African countries, we can help so that you can deal with all the regulatory issues and then an environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Muito obrigada.
Thank you to all participants for this panel. It was a pleasure to be here with you, to listen from your ideas and learning so much from you all. It's always a pleasure to share the stage with people that have so much to contribute. Stephen and Luis, Felipe, Alberto, Jorge, thank you so much.